Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLM PBS NPR. Next is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I am your host, Marcus Atkinson. If you want to know more about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can also follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie. There you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are not from Erie, Pennsylvania, you probably don't know that we have endured tons of jokes about our fair city. So much so that we've even had campaigns in the past that said it's okay to love Erie. Everybody takes a shot at Erie. I don't care if it's the pizza bomber or all of this other foolishness that you hear. When Erie is mentioned or snowfall, because we're always wrestling back and forth with us in Buffalo. But usually when you hear Erie, you hear something negative that follows. And so with all that being said, it feels so good to have political candidates at the highest level fighting over Erie, Pennsylvania. You've seen Donald Trump come here on several occasions, and just this past week, we've had Kamala Harris come as a candidate, Vice President Harris. When you look at the news, as Pennsylvania goes, so goes the election, Erie County and Erie in particular. And so this is the time of the year that we have a great deal of self-esteem because everybody wants a piece of Erie. When Vice President Harris came to town, it was a very well-attended rally, and afterwards we wanted to just kind of bring people together and get their opinions on the rally, the candidate, and the race overall. And so without further ado, we've got 5 special guests that are joining us via Zoom today. First, we have Mr. Scott Johnson, who is the business manager for the Roofers Union here in Erie. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. And we have a grad student from one of the local universities, Ms. Zeta Pring. Zeta, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We've got a show favorite, County Councilman Rock Copeland, with that commanding name. Rock, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
And we have the Northwest PA Chair for Black Women for Harris Walls, for the Harris Walls campaign, Ms. Selena King. Selena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And so, Selena, let me start with you since you play such a pivotal role in this. Just talk about the planning for or the desire to come into Erie. I want to say this is the vice president's first time coming to Erie. And, you know, you've been a big part of the planning process here in PA. How important was it for her to come to Pennsylvania, Erie in particular, and state her case?
Well, Erie is very important to the election. We hear it every election cycle. As Erie goes, so goes Pennsylvania. And as Pennsylvania goes, so goes the nation. And so it's very important for her to be here and speak directly to our constituents here in Erie so that we could hear directly from the VP. Erie is going to determine the outcome of this election. We've seen in every presidential election, every statewide election. We saw in the last election for our governor, for Governor Shapiro, how pivotal Erie was. He spent a lot of time here, and so did our lieutenant governor. He was here a lot in Erie. And so Erie really determines what the voters will do. And so it was very important for the campaign to have her here in the last 20 days so that we could hear from her directly. She also had a closed door meeting with some business owners here. So, excuse me, it was very important for her to come and talk to her because talk to us. And even from the turnout, as you saw, the energy was exciting. We had over 10,000 people in attendance that came. It was bigger than the Trump rally. And so, again, Erie's very, very important, it being part of the bellwether voting cycle. So,
Excellent.
Starting point.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we have 4 guests. I'm looking at the screen, counting myself as a 5th guest. We have 4 guests in studio with us today. Zeta, I'm going to come to you. And, you know, obviously with you all not being able to see our guests on screen, you know, we've got a nice diverse group. Selena King, obviously African-American woman. Zeta is one of our Caucasian sisters, and she's younger. Again, she's a grad student. And then we got Scott Johnson, one of our white brothers, and he is in a union. And then we've got Rock Copeland, as you know, who is a county councilman. He's one of our white brothers as well. So we've got some diversity going on. Zeta, from a young person's perspective, why were you so excited to not just go to the rally, but what excites you about Kamala Harris in general?
Yeah, I think that young voters are just a lot more excited about Kamala. I think that she's bringing a lot to the table that we haven't seen from a lot of politicians before. She cares about issues that are really, really important to us, things like stopping Project 2025. As a young woman, making sure that I have access to healthcare and reproductive freedom is so important to me and so important to so many of my friends. And Kamala Harris has plans to kind of help combat all these agendas that Donald Trump and all the other politicians he's put in office have in place to kind of help restrict our freedoms.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I'll go to Scott. Scott, you are a union guy. And I know that
Yep.
the union vote has been really big to both of these candidates for this particular election and all the elections for that matter. Give us your take on what brought you to the Harris campaign, why you support this candidate, and what brought you to the rally.
Well, I got a couple of things. First and foremost, she does support union, as does Biden. To see an actual sitting president, as in Biden, to attend and walk a picket line with the UAW workers and everything really sent a huge signal that, as Trump will say, I'm rich. I don't have to be here. I'm giving up all this stuff. Well, as Biden is the sitting U.S. president, there are many things he could have been doing, but he decided to go and stand and march in the picket line. From the labor standpoint, and I say that union is, the above all, supreme all. But yes, we have built the middle class. So being out there and seeing that support is great for us to have that encouragement and everything. And Harris, just the tone she sets.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's all rhetoric. I hate to say it this way, he's a blowhard. He's trying to incite fear. He's trying to take everybody's rights, to where Kamala wants to keep your rights and still your rights, protect the women's rights. I have a wife and 2 daughters. That's a line you don't cross right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if someone came and told me they'll give me $1 billion tomorrow, but take my wife and my daughter's rights. I'll stay at the status I'm at.
Right.
I'm happy that I hold dignity in that. There's ethics, morals.
Yes.
These are all things that are on that ballot right now.
Yeah.
And seeing Harris and listening to her and everything, and just being able to complete a complete sentence is huge.
Yeah.
I don't like to see the divisiveness that's come over the last. Well, he started running back in 2015. To watch how the country's divided itself since then is just crazy.
Yeah, the divisiveness is completely unsustainable. Before I go to Rock, when it comes to collective bargaining, I think that, years ago there was a huge debate in terms of the value of unions, and I think we're at a stage right now where most people agree that companies have shown that they will do as little as possible for the average person, were it not for them to have the ability to collectively bargain for themselves. They'll replace you with AI. They'll pay you as little as possible. They'll get rid of your overtime. It is obvious that is the agenda of the overwhelming majority of big business. So unions right now, I think, have more value than ever than they have in this country. Rock Copeland, give us your take on this. We love having Rock at the show. Rock always has, great takes on these things.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, some of the messaging that Kamala has been using in terms of how it relates to Erie. Here in Erie County, we know a lot about a housing crisis, a shortage of affordable housing, which has been a key point that she's been talking about. At the rally, she was talking about, this was kind of new, the issue when we have relatives that are struggling with catastrophic diseases. I think she said her mother had cancer, and what it's like to have to take care of them at home and to provide for home services through Medicare, which I think speaks to a lot of people in Erie County, making sure that our loved ones are taken care of. And the thing I hear her talk about all the time is supporting the middle class, giving the middle class an opportunity to rise in their station. And I think that these issues are speaking to Erie extremely well in terms of the battles that we're fighting here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having her here to actually deliver that message in person was hugely impactful.
Mm-hmm. So, Scott set up a couple of things that I want to touch on. First of all, Selena, let me start with you about tone. And Scott said something that I actually touched on when I was interviewed by the local news here. They asked if I learned anything new from the rally. I said, not necessarily. I mean, she's pretty strict about sticking to her talking points. I tell you what you learn every time you go to a rally, in my opinion, though. Not even so much learn, it's what you feel. And you feel reassured. You feel connected to, you feel understood. The tone is different, right? And there is a presidential air about this woman completely. Selena, talk about that, because Scott is absolutely right. This political rhetoric, the level that we're at right now, the temperature in the country right now is completely unsustainable. What kind of feedback are you getting from the way Vice President Harris comes across just as a person with her demeanor, her disposition, things along those lines?
Well, beyond her having just a presidential air, she's experienced. That's the one thing
Absolutely.
that we have. Her background being a former prosecutor, but also attorney general and being a United States senator. You can't deny her experience. But also, a lot of people talk about her warmness and being personable.
Yes.
When you meet her, she's extremely warm and kind, and she's for the people. That's been not just a tagline, but she's really about meeting people where they are and being able to speak to people's needs. One of the things I like that she said on Monday was that she's a lot of the policies that she supported, and also when she was in the Senate, that she was able to help craft policy around personal experiences and lived experiences. And I think that's why most Americans are able to come around this campaign, because she was able to talk about, again, caregiving, because she'd helped take care of her mother. And that's something that a
Hmm.
lot of people are experiencing. We have a rapidly aging community. Just here in Pennsylvania, we're one of the states with the highest number of aging constituents. And so a
Hmm.
lot of people can identify with that. And when you have candidates who are able to talk about their lived experiences and not be ashamed to say, hey, I
Yeah.
know what you're going through, and let's make common sense government that works for the people. That's why people can identify with Kamala Harris. And so that's what
Hmm.
you're seeing is people coming around a candidate who's able to say, I know what you're going through. I may not have all the answers, but let's try to solve this together. And that's been the feedback that we've gotten with the president, vice president.
So I want to throw that same question out to Zeta, because along those same lines, Selena, I watched the clip and the lady was talking about her mother that died. I want to say her mom died of cancer as well. But the lady was very emotional, and Vice President Harris kind of leaned in, was letting her know, listen, I think your mom would really want you to remember her as she lived and not as she died, and in a very reassuring way. And it's moments like that people are like, yes, finally there's an adult in the room, right? Because when it comes to the highest office in the land, you need adults to be in the room. When you watch how her and the sitting President Biden handle, the hurricane relief right now, same situation, the adult in the room, but the tone, the connectiveness, the relatability. Zeta, touch on that from a youth standpoint. What's the feedback you're getting from people in your circle, or maybe even people on your campus if you engage about this?
Yeah, so kind of echo what Selena said. Harris really, really just relates to the everyday person. And I personally find that really relatable in a candidate. Like you said, having that adult in the room. She even referred to Donald Trump on Monday as a deeply unserious man. It's really nice to see a politician who is taking these things seriously and is also able to relate to the everyday person, to talk about those struggles that we're seeing every day. She talked
Mhm.
about the sandwich generation, these people who are taking care of young children, but also taking care of their parents simultaneously. I'm in that age group where I do have friends who are taking care of their children and also trying to support their parents as they're aging and as they're retiring. And it's very difficult on them. She also talked about price gouging, how it's almost impossible to afford groceries right now. As someone who's younger, who is still in grad school, it's really, really difficult for people my age to survive, to afford their groceries, to afford childcare, to afford everyday life in a way that people our age could have 10, 15 years ago. And it's really important to me that Vice President Harris really makes this a centerpiece of her platform, making sure that life is kind of affordable for people again. She relates, she understands what it's like to take care of family members, to take care of a family, to raise a family, and to really help make sure that everything can kind of be affordable for Americans again. I think that's something that a lot of young people are really resonating with.
I want to rest on that price gouging thing. Rock, I want to send this to you. And again, if anybody wants to add to anything that's being said, that's just shoot me a signal. This price gouging thing, I've noticed that the area where, if she does struggle, the area she struggles the most in interviews is when they ask her, what would you do different from Joe Biden? How are you different from Joe Biden? And to me, this is a tricky dance. I personally feel that Joe Biden would go on Mount Rushmore, especially for black folk, for all the obvious reasons. You know, I don't, it's a loyalty thing. I don't know, but Rock, when I think about COVID and how so many people bent over backwards to overcharge the public in a lot of different ways. And I look at how strong she's being right now on, if we catch you price gouging, you will be held accountable. I can't help but think, man, if Joe Biden would have did that, stared into the camera and gave that speech, and then did just that more often, that would have landed more. It seems like an obvious place to say, I would have done this differently. Give me your thoughts on how tricky it is, or what you think this is all about in terms of trying to differentiate herself from Joe Biden and at the same time remain loyal to this man that she still is the vice president underneath. And then,
Yeah,
Selena, I know you got a lot of experience in this area as well. Unpack that, because it's the one area that I do see a lot of people putting their finger on online. When that question is asked, it's the area that seems like she hasn't really found her footing.
and I think you can't undersell the fact that Joe Biden's strong endorsement as he was making the decision to vacate the ballot. Um, she obviously owes President Biden quite a bit,
Mm.
and it was a strong political ally, and I suggesting, how would she do things different? Like, obviously, there could be a sense of betrayal to deliver criticism to say, I would do X, Y, and Z different. Um, I think what's convenient though is, as she says, she is not President Biden and she's not Donald Trump. She's her own person,
Yeah.
and it's pretty clear in the way that she interacts with others. The fact that she is from an entirely different generation, that you see. You can tell the differences even if she's not verbalizing to the public. And when she's talking about the price gouging, willing to use the bully pulpit of the office to put their thumb on the scales. Too many metaphors here. Thumb on the scales to make sure that the middle class has a chance to prosper.
Mhm.
That's what we need in that office. Somebody that's fighting for everyday people, even in just general policy shifts, or even outreach to these corporations when they're. And I see it in my profession that they are escalating prices severely because of the shortages that we experience, and it ripples everywhere. And to have somebody put their thumb on the scale and say, "No, you are going to make sure that you are at capacity
Yeah.
to produce these goods, and you are not going to take advantage of the situation." I think that that's hugely impactful, and it just says
Mhm.
something about who she is and what her belief system is, and who she's trying to fight for. Donald Trump's fighting for billionaires, and
Mhm.
and she's fighting for everyday people. And
Selena, speak into that. Her trying to make a difference between herself and Biden, and just the trickiness of that assignment.
Well, to the point of price gouging, I will say the way that she really differentiates it is going to be in the policies. Um,
Hmm.
and the only way that she's going to be able to really do that and set herself apart is to ensure that she has the support in Congress and in Senate. Because you can't do anything without having strong support in those two chambers. And it is going to be holding corporations accountable. She already said that she wants to do that and she's going to be tough at it. She was a tough prosecutor. She was a tough AG. And so she's going to, I believe, will do that as president. And so if she gets the support that she has, if we can reelect people like Bob Casey, who Bob Casey has been really strong on price gouging as a US Senator. He's made that part of his campaign. It's also Senator Fetterman. That's a thing that he's really big on. They have been two no nonsense senators when it's come down to going up against big corporations and telling them, look, you cannot just do what you want to do and just go after the American people and think that we're not going to hold you accountable when it comes to big business and how business
Hmm.
is run here in the United States. And even with what we've seen them do with how tariffs have been done and how they've stood up for labor unions. And so because she has been that same type of vice president and how she was even as an attorney general, I believe that that's how she separates herself from President Biden, that she'll be extremely tough and strict on those sanctions and how
Hmm.
she'll hold up tariffs and corporations and their corporate greed. And
Hmm.
again, but that support will have to come from the two chambers in the US Senate and in our Congress. And we'll have to ensure that we are voting the way we need to down ballot so that she will have that support.
Selena, thank you for continually reminding us of just how qualified she is as a candidate, right? Much more qualified than the alternative. and much more qualified than a lot of people that are in Congress and places like that as well, and positions like that as well right now. So thank you for reminding us of that. Scott, you brought up a couple of things. One, you brought up reproductive rights, and I want to go into that in a little while. I'm anxious to get the ladies' opinions or thoughts on that. Was there a particular policy outside of that that she talked about or she talks about in these rallies that excite you individually or your family?
Yeah, Rock was just touching on it on the price gouging and everything like that. So a lot of people are complaining and saying that, if the minimum wage went up or, if the wages went up, that all these prices were going to go up. Well, the wages did go up slightly, but again, minimum wage is still $7.25 here in PA, but then nationally or federally, it's still $7.25. But yet all the costs of everything have skyrocketed through the thing. So I saw a thing this morning that this sort of touches on. It says, I don't understand this economy when nursing homes are so expensive. They bankrupt their grandparents, but nursing home aides need to use food banks. So the workers that are there, they're going to food banks. They're going to buy clothing that's used from, the different centers and everything. Another one is daycare is so expensive. It eats up one parent's entire paycheck. And yet the provider providing daycare, they're making $10 an hour. So where is that money going?
Right.
The costs have gone up. McDonald's, no one bitches about the CEO taking a $10 million bonus at the end of the year, plus whatever their salary is, but yet, they call it a value meal. There's no value in it when you're going and you're spending $14 to get a simple lunch.
Yeah.
It's sort of comical. So that's, again, where the unions come in. And this is why I like the support that she's showing. We do negotiate the wages for the workers and the rights and everything. So, we have mandatory overtime. We feel that you should be able to make a good enough wage working a 40-hour-a-week job that you don't have to take on a second job to just try and provide for your family, to go buy that vehicle. When you look at the cost of vehicles now, it's like, my God, $70,000-$80,000 for a next vehicle.
Yeah.
That's just outrageous. And then from the union standpoint, me being in my position, we do have a diverse outlook in our union. We do have a lot of the Trump supporters, a lot of the Harris supporters. But through union, we have to learn that it's not a one size fit all. Not everything we do is going to make every member happy.
Right.
I have a lot of things that I've had to do here that are going to upset certain people, but our philosophy is provide for the most, or the majority. If you can make the majority happy, then the other people are going to have to sort of compromise on, hey, this works for the majority. That's how life's supposed to be. You're supposed to watch out for your neighbors. You can't go do everything for them, but can you help here and there?
Yeah.
So just seeing Kamala bring up some of those points, how she's going to go after the price gouging. I don't think, I like the idea of building the houses to try and bring those housing costs down, but it's not going to be an overnight thing. But that's what a lot of people don't understand. They're going to say after day one, oh my God, we can't do this. As for the economy, they're saying, the economy's so horrible, at least the Trump supporters and Trump is. The economy's so horrible, but I know for me to take me and my wife to go to I'm a Bills fan, to go to the Bills stadium for me and her for a one-game thing is between $500 and $600.
Yep.
But if you look, these stadiums are sold out. Concerts are sold out. Warner Theater's open. They're selling out when things are going on. People are going out and dining. People are bitching about the cost, but they're going. If the economy's that bad, how are they doing it?
Right. And one of the things that President Obama, former President Obama, has been reminding people of is the economy that you all remember is so great when Donald Trump was in office was my economy, he said. I handed it to him. So give me credit for that. Let me go to Zeta. Zeta, same question. Is there a particular policy that she's pushing for? And to your point as well, Scott, when they talk about how come the Harris administration hasn't done it the last 4 years? There's no Harris administration. That's the Biden administration.
Absolutely.
But Zeta, is there a policy that jumps out at you? Obviously, reproductive freedom, but anything other than that that says, I can really get on board with that?
Yeah, so obviously reproductive freedom is a huge policy for me that I think I'm really excited to support Kamala Harris on when I vote for her this November. But again, just really going back to that the cost of living, that she's just really focused on tackling this. I know Scott mentioned that childcare workers, parents are paying their entire week's paycheck for childcare, and yet we see childcare providers who make $11 an hour. I worked in childcare. It's not easy to be able to provide for your family while doing so. And I think it's really important that Harris is tackling these issues. Same with people who have families in nursing homes. That cost of living is really huge. I know some people my age, myself included, who work multiple jobs just to be able to afford to live, to be able to afford our grocery bill, to be able to afford any of our other bills, to be able to put ourselves through school. And that's not the norm. That's not the standard. That's not the way it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think that's something that young voters and myself included are really, really excited about, is to be able to hopefully afford to be able to live, to not have to work multiple jobs, to be able to go to college at an affordable rate and not be price gouged by universities paying, $60,000, $70,000 a year in tuition, just to be able to get a degree and a good education.
Mm. Excellent point. What are the issues in your district that you're hearing that people are most frustrated by or most excited by when they listen to Kamala Harris's platform?
Yeah, it's interesting how the local issues and the national issues kind of echo one another. I know that childcare has been a huge conversation for the last year or so. Uh, just at the point that was brought up, the idea that childcare workers are making $10 to $15 an hour, taking care of our most precious asset, our children, which is almost a crime. And so having a lot of concern for that and making sure that we're providing for our youth, and also to give the opportunity for families to survive, because nowadays it really almost takes a dual income to make it by. I really appreciate when she's talking about an opportunity economy. It
Mhm.
sounds kind of nebulous, but it's really just about giving the average person a better shot at improving their lives and giving a better future to their children than they had themselves. And I think it's pretty clear in the last generation or so that has stopped being the case. That
Mhm.
we cannot say for certain that we're handing our children a better future than we had ourselves. And that opportunity economy, making sure that that's an option. I mean, when I was at the rally, I had my young daughter with me, and I really it really hit home to me as why we're here, what's the reason why this is so important, and I trust that Kamala is going to provide for a better future for my child, and that matters a lot to me.
Mhm. Mhm. Selena, let's go with you on that. Just the things, because you're hearing from a lot of different individuals. The thing that really hits home and really resonates. Again, outside of reproductive freedom, we'll go into that in a second. What really hits home that you're hearing about?
Definitely the housing crisis is one of the big things. We hear so much about the lack of affordable housing, but also the low to moderate income housing. Here in Pennsylvania, there's a big issue where we're seeing a lot of people, especially first time home buyers, with housing stock that is really not available for homes in the like $100,000 price range. And so we're seeing a lot of our people who live in Pennsylvania who can't find housing in that price range that are living either in Ohio or New York. And so they're living here, they work in Pennsylvania, but they're living in those two states. And so that is one of the things that we've even seen Governor Shapiro. That's like, let's be more competitive here in Pennsylvania to try to increase our housing stock in that what we call LMI, which is low to moderate income housing, so that we can keep people here in Pennsylvania, so that, as we used to say here at Erie, live, work, and play here in our state, so they don't have to look elsewhere. And so that's something that we've been working on here on the federal level to try to make sure that that's a thing, that we can make that a reality so people don't have to go and live elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's been a huge thing, but also making sure that housing's affordable for our renting population. We've seen rent skyrocket to triple. Some people are paying $600 a month, started out in 1 year, and then it went up to like $800, $900 within the following year, and there's no rent control. So that's become unaffordable for a lot of people. And we have
Mhm.
to make sure that there's some kind of policy that allows rent to be affordable, but also people can live with dignity, because we have a lot of our local landlords that aren't taking care of their homes, and people aren't being held accountable to make sure that people have affordable, but also quality housing. So that's a big issue that we've been hearing a lot about on an everyday basis.
So Zeta, I do want to bring up this reproductive freedom conversation now. To go back to what Scott said, I've got a wife and 3 beautiful daughters, and to have someone suggest or to have someone make it illegal for them to make their own decision when it comes to reproductive freedom. I'm not forcing my opinion on them when it comes to that. You damn sure aren't going to have the right to do so. And so that is just a hot button issue. Now you have this candidate running around bragging and boasting that he spearheaded the demise of Roe v. Wade. And before I go to your answer, it kills me when I look at these rallies and I look at the sea of women there and I hear the misogynistic language of not just the candidate, but his running mate, right? And then I think about the reproductive freedoms and the fact that, much like The Handmaid's Tale, as was pointed out in one of our last shows, almost boasting about the fact that they have a right to tell women what to and what not to do with their own bodies in these particular instances, right? Give us a glimpse of, and then I want to go back to Selena before we go back to the general population. Give us a glimpse of what this conversation sounds like when you are talking to women in general.
Absolutely. So Donald Trump said that he had concepts of a plan, but we all know that that's a 900-page manual called Project 2025 that's titling all of these things that he wants to do to cut back our reproductive freedom and our access to quality health care. And I really like that Tim Walz kind of mentions that you don't make a playbook unless you plan on using it.
Yes.
So Donald Trump says that he doesn't have any influence in Project 2025, that he's never, had any connections to the Heritage Foundation, but that's not true.
It's been debunked.
And something that I hear a lot from people my age, other women that I just talked to, is this lack of access to reproductive freedom that we've been seeing being constantly diminished since the Trump administration. This has been almost half of my life. Like he said, he started running in 2015. I'm only 24 years old. Almost half of my life has been the Donald Trump administration, fear-mongering and helping cut back on our reproductive freedom and our reproductive rights. And with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, we've seen women dying because they can't have access to the healthcare that they need. We have a mother in Georgia who had a 6-year-old child who died due to complications from a DNC that she was denied access to because of the laws that Donald Trump has put into place. I don't think that's very pro-life when we have women that are dying because they can't get access to the healthcare we need. That's not pro-life, you're pro-fetus. And that's something that I think that Kamala Harris is really strong on, is that she wants to help codify Roe v. Wade. We want to help repeal all these national abortion bans that Donald Trump and all people he wants to put in office are trying to put forward.
Yeah. Selena, we'll go to you, and then Rock and Scott, we'll go to both of you on this, because as Scott started out, and Rock, you took your daughter. So this is something that in some way, shape, or form, we all have a stake in this particular conversation. Selena, reproductive freedoms. Just as a woman, the daughter of a very strong woman, I always tell Selena how impressed I am with her mom. What is this conversation like for you personally and your circle?
Well, definitely, I could not sit here and not talk about the Black maternal health crisis, which is the #1 health crisis in America.
Yep.
It's definitely something that is big here for Pennsylvania. We are very close to having in Pennsylvania our own Momnibus Act. We have the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus has their own Black maternal health caucus that has been putting out bills for this exact thing. And it's something that I have been supporting, and something that's very personal to me. Not long ago, even locally, had a situation where a doctor here did not want to hear about my own issues, and had a near-death experience dealing with a reproductive issue personally. And it was due to a doctor not having sensitivity to me being a woman of color and not listening to me, and could have died because he was not listening and felt like, okay, well, you're okay. You don't need the medication that you're telling me. You're not really in pain. And found out that I was dealing with an issue that should have been dealt with. And had he been more sensitive to me being a woman of color and knowing my body, we could have dealt with the situation a lot differently. Thank God now I do have a woman of color doctor that deals with reproductive issues. So I'm doing a lot better, but we have to deal with these issues. We have to make sure that we have doctors who are skilled in reproductive rights, who aren't going to discriminate based off of people's color of their skin, and are more sensitive to these issues, but also having access. And so those are issues that we deal with in the Black maternal health space that are very important to me and women across this nation. And so that's also part of the conversation. It's not just access to and denying of access, but ensuring that we are having people who know these issues that are on the table. We have to take the conversation broader. And so that's what I would want to make sure that when we're talking about these issues, that we don't forget about the Black maternal health crisis in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's bigger than just denying abortions. It's also making sure that we talk about the color issues that are also out there too. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the part that I wanted to always make sure that we talk about, that I think we miss, especially with having a woman of color on the ballot.
Absolutely. Scott, give us your wife's voice on this. When Roe v. Wade was struck down and this became the hot button issue that it is right now, rightfully so, what was her reaction? What does she sound like on this particular topic? And then Rock, we'll come to you on just your overall take on this subject.
It's crazy. She's very vocal on this. She's all in on this stuff. Again, having the wife and the two daughters and everything. I don't think anybody should ever be able to step in and tell a woman what she should have to do with her body,
Right.
what her health care should be like. And now looking at this, that's just a first step. When you see what someone's willing to do there, it's just like when you have the gun advocates say, well, if they ban this gun, they're coming after all our guns. Well, if they're taking that liberty away from women, what's the next one?
Right.
So a lot of men don't realize, but men can get breast cancer. It's not
Yeah.
very common, but
Yeah.
it can happen. But now, is this going to be the next step so doctors or healthcare systems aren't inundated? Are they going to turn around and say, well, hey, breast cancer isn't our issue, so we're going to limit the costs on that? Now, that has touched home with my family over the course of the last few years and everything. So that is a hot topic. Now when you look at a guy and you say, okay, well, here's an easy one for the reproductive rights and everything. Well, a man can go out and impregnate multiple women in an evening. A woman could get pregnant once over the course of 9, 10 months, however long it takes to, once you have the child, to be able to reproduce again. So the simple one there is, I know I'll get a lot of men fired up over this one, but vasectomy. Get the vasectomy. You stop it right there. But as soon as you say that to a man, it's don't tell me what to do with my body.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that right that you don't want it done there, but it's okay to go ahead and tell the women, well, hey, your right doesn't matter. We're going to stop that. I also want my daughters to be able to look up and know that as a woman, you can achieve whatever you want by putting in the hard work. Put in the work. I don't care, man, woman, child, black, white, yellow, green, brown, whatever. Put in the work. You should be able to achieve that. So I want someone in office that they can look up to and say, that's what I want.
That's what it looks like,
That's
right?
my role model.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to go that far, I can go that far. Roxy and your daughter's photos down there at that campaign rally the other night, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kamala's nieces at hers for the DNC.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful photo, seeing her daughter her niece sitting out in the thing watching her aunt.
Yeah.
You can strive for that.
Yes, you can.
My wife, she's a lot more vocal than I could ever think about on this issue.
The Senate, the confirmation hearings for Judge Kavanaugh, that clip with Vice President Harris asking that very same thing. Is there a law that you know of that regulates the body of men, however she worded it? And he was stumped, to your point, right? You're not obsessed with telling men what to do with their bodies. Rock, I'll send this to you and I'll give you the extra assignment of talk about reproductive freedoms, segue into Project 2025 as it relates to this and just the overall danger. What Zeta pointed out is absolutely correct. When Tim Wall said that, I thought that was brilliant, because some people are trying to downplay, well, it's just a document. No one draws up a playbook that they don't intend to use. He was so right. Talk about that, Rock.
Yeah, I really think I have to go back to my personal story as it relates to this. Growing up in a very conservative household, very religious. I remember going to college with some pretty firmly held beliefs regarding the morality of abortion. And I had a very absolutist perspective when I was young. And as I got to know people, I started to realize that was just absolutely wrong, that it is not an absolute moral judgment that one can say this is wrong, this is right, that it really is up to the woman
Yeah.
and in consultation with her doctor to make those decisions, that somebody dealing with a maternal defect that might sacrifice the life of the mother at 20 weeks is not the same thing as you see where I'm going here. And this
Right.
is the problem with the Republicans trying to take an absolutist perspective about this and say, no, this is right or wrong. Now, all of a sudden, if you say it's personhood for the fetus, then all of a sudden, this a court is saying that IVF
Hmm.
is now illegal because a cluster of cells is apparently a person. And it just simply cannot be the case that each individual lived experience is something very different. And in the case that a woman um, decides that this is what she needs to do for her, whatever reason,
Hmm.
um, that she should have the right to do that. And that is such an American thing to say. This is not something that the government should intercede in. I
Right.
really appreciated uh, Kamala talking about you don't have to sacrifice your own personal convictions on your own personal case,
Yeah.
allow somebody else to make a different decision. And
Yeah.
I just I really think that that is such an impactful thing. And you hear some of the Republicans saying, I remember, I can't remember what candidate it was. He was, I think it was the gentleman running against Sherrod Brown in Ohio, said something about he sees all these postmenopausal women getting upset about abortion rights and why should they even care? And it's such an out of touch
Yeah.
touch perspective to not understand that these women also have daughters, that these women had to make hard choices in their life, and they know what it's like for somebody else to have to make these choices.
Yeah.
And relating to Project 2025, it is an absolutist document in terms of um, an absolute takeover
Hmm.
with an absolutist ideology that would infringe upon the individual choice of people.
Yep.
And for any American to look at that and say that that is um, somehow able to exist with the idea of American freedom, it just doesn't make sense.
None whatsoever. And listen, let me say this, and then if you want to speak on Project 2025, just throw me a wave. I'm talking to someone that thinks along those lines. This guy's a Republican, and we're talking about reproductive rights, and he's a religious guy, and he went there immediately. I'm like, well, first of all, your Bible says a lot of things about, fornication. We policing that now, right? Even in your own household, can you control that? Your Bible says a lot about divorce. There's a whole lot of Christian folk divorce, and the list goes on. But most importantly, everybody in this country doesn't live according to the same tenets that you live by. The Buddhist down the block has has voting rights. It's their country too. The Muslim you can't stand, it's their country too. The transgender person that makes you uncomfortable, it's their country too. These people are citizens, and it's their country too. If that works for you and your family, God bless you and your family. You don't get to push it on me or her or him or them. And that's what people forget. We were once upon a time bragged about being this melting pot of ideas and backgrounds and religions and creeds and ethnicities, to now moving towards a place of, like you said, Rock, this absolute mentality of, well, this small group feels like this. And damn it, you all ought to agree with that. And we should be able to enforce that. Well, when is that America? Right? Project 2025. Is there anybody else that's as nervous about this document as the average citizen? Zeta, I see you shaking your head. Speak to it.
Yeah, so kind of to touch on what you said, I think that something that's really important to note about Project 2025 is that a lot of the Republican Party now, really, a lot of their talking points are constantly that, Democrats are going to take away your freedoms, they're going to take away your civil liberties. But I've never seen a document that has, more restrictions people's civil liberties, more restrictions people's freedoms than these Project 2025 declarations that they're trying to make. I think that all of these bans on abortion, bans on healthcare, restricting people's access to income, increasing people's taxes. That to me really sounds like restricting people's freedoms and their personal civil liberties. They're really claiming that, Kamala Harris and any of the Democratic candidates are going to come in and do.
Yeah. Yeah. Selena, as we near the finish line here, speak to the polling because, and I'm one of them. I think when you look at the polling, is it as razor thin as they're making it out to be? The media has a tendency of making this ping pong game out of, polls and the election and everything else. Based on the intel that you're getting, and then Rock, you can speak to this as well because you both are in this space. What does the polling look like in Pennsylvania in particular? Because we get so many conflicting accounts, it feels like, depending on what channel you watch.
So the polling changes daily, but we can't take anything for granted. The polling results are very close. So the last polling results that we got was, Vice President is leading in Pennsylvania, but it's still a very close margin, and it's baffling to me that it's even close that Trump still has the tight. That he's still even close to her. That's just still,
Exactly.
I can't even find the words. It's still unbelievable to me that he has the following that he does. And so it's still very important that people still get out and vote and that they don't look at the polls and take that for what it's worth. Because even those poll samples are very small. It's not that they're taking a huge group of people. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
maybe a group of 100 people that they're polling at a time. So we have to take that with a grain of salt sometimes too. It's the one thing that I always like to tell people that they can't always go by, oh, the polls are telling us this is what the voting base is going to look like. But it also does let people know too where people's heads are and what the voting electorate is looking like too. So it's one of those things where I'm like, just please go out and vote, regardless
Right.
of what the polls are saying. Just please go out and vote because, again, we can't take anything for granted, and we need every single registered voter to get out and vote on or before November 5th.
Hmm. Yeah. Rock, the polling. Give us your thoughts on the polling.
Yeah, I was reading a book by Ezra Klein. It's why we're so polarized, and they talk a lot about issue sorting and how both of the parties have very much sorted very clear lines of if you live in a rural community, I could pretty well guess what your position on gun control is, what your position on abort. Like these are now sorted to the extent that people are um, elevating their political identity as part of who they are. And you see it in the electorate in terms of it being very calcified, that this split 50-50 is really cemented in place, that not many Trump supporters are going to say, oh my goodness, he said this at a rally and now I'm changing my mind on the voter on who I'm voting for. So we're fighting over a very slim margin. And you're
Yeah.
going to see that couple point swing here and there. But I mean, you've seen some pretty big news cycles in
Hmm.
this election. And coming out of the convention and the convention bump, they used to talk about being worth 4 to 5%, and you just don't see that movement. And so I think it's really important. When I was at the rally, it gave me so much hope to see so many people so passionate, because I know that sometimes Democrats have to fall in love with their candidate to show up. And so I saw that, and it gave me a lot of hope that Democrats will turn out and show up for their candidate. But this 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 razor margin that we're fighting over, a 3 to 5% portion of the population that's somehow undecided in this election still at times. And so for me, it's hope for the future, but understanding that the reality of the work that's going to take to get that portion of the population out to vote in the first place, much less to vote for the candidate that you're supporting. And I think that's the story of the polls is there's not going to be a lot of movement. There's not going to be a landslide. This isn't, uh, uh, an election like where there's a massive swing. This is going to be margins in select counties in 5 or 6 different states. That's
Yeah.
going to determine the outcome.
Before we got on the air, Scott talked about just seeing different sides of people that you've known for a long time throughout this election cycle. Zeta pointed out the amount of freedoms that Project 2025 limits, and then Selena said that she's still astounded that Trump is even in the race. And I think when you marry all of those different points, it underscores to me that in very large numbers, some of the very people that we work with, that we're related to, that we live next door to, that we see every day, are secretly okay with forcing you to live a certain way according to what they want, right? That is a scary thought. Let's start with final statements. If everybody can kind of in their mind get a succinct statement, we'll start with Scott and then we'll move around the horn here. So you attended the rally. You're going to vote in this election. What do you want to say to the listener about this upcoming election before we close out?
I want you to vote for, honestly, who you think is going to let you live your best life. Um, I want morals. I want values. The economy, again, you said it earlier. Trump didn't create that economy. That was handed to him from Obama. 2 years into it, you saw where it started going. Inflation actually started under him because of some of his policies. Then the pandemic took place, so that sort of led to everything else. But what I'm seriously hoping is polls are skewed. And I'm hoping that, and my message to everybody is, you can say whatever you want to your family, your friends, and everything, because I feel some people are embarrassed about what they did after seeing some of this rhetoric that's
I
happening.
agree.
So I don't get into it with my friends. Okay, yes, if I voted for Trump, I'm going to continue saying I'm going to vote for Trump. But understand, when you go in, whether you do mail-in ballot, you do in-person voting, you decide what you want to put on
That's
there.
right.
And then if someone really is going to hound you and ask how you voted, tell them what they want to hear. That doesn't change what you voted. Tell them what they want to hear if that's going to make your life easy. Or I'd really like to see people stand up and say, here's how I voted. If you don't like it, here's why. Have that debate then. And I'll be the first to say that I have gotten more on the side I don't like to see. I have gotten to the ignorant side, but that's because if they're going to sit there and listen to Trump, that's all they understand. That's how he talks and everything. So I feed it back to him. And I do see that I shouldn't do that, but sometimes it's speak to them as they choose to be spoken to, what they
Right.
want to hear. But I'd really like to see that all go away.
Okay.
So vote however you want to vote, but vote with your conscience, vote with your heart, vote for what you think is best for you and your family.
All right. Selena, closing message.
This really is a very consequential election, and it comes down to what kind of America and in the grand scheme of things, what kind of world do you want to live in? And that's how you have to choose your candidate, because they are going to be making decisions that are going to affect our everyday lives. And so you have to vote with your moral conscience, because that's what's on the line. Morals, ethics, our freedoms are on the line. And so that's what's going to be important when you're making that decision on which candidate you're going to support. And for me, the choice is clear on who to support when I'm going to the ballot on or before November 5th. And I hope that when everyone is making that decision, every registered voter makes sure that they go out and vote. We cannot afford to sit out. So for me, it's a matter of urgency to make sure that everybody who is registered, or if you're not registered, get registered before October 21st. That is the last day to register in the state of Pennsylvania, that you make sure that you get out and vote, because we cannot afford to not participate in this election. It is serious. There's too much at stake. We say it every time, but if you don't see how serious that this one is, you cannot afford to complain. You cannot afford to talk about what's not happening in the world, what's not happening here in Erie, because we've seen the results of what could and could not happen on January 5th. We've talked about that. And if you don't participate, it's on you. So that I'm urging everybody to participate in this election cycle.
All right. Let me go to Rock Copeland. Zeta, we will save our youthful voice for the last take. Rock, last message to the voters.
Yeah, I consider myself a policy geek. I like having the back and forth conversation about tax policy and how we should do things. And I miss those conversations because it reminds me of better times. And the one thing that I find frustrating is I believe that Kamala Harris's policies will benefit people. I believe that Kamala Harris will produce a better economy.
Yeah.
I believe that Kamala Harris has a more ethical view on how to handle immigration. All that said, I cannot trade my views on the economy for the survival of democracy. And if people are out there thinking, well, I'm concerned about my pocketbook, I say the economy is doomed if we do not have an American democracy. That there is no such thing as global peace without strengthening our institutions and making sure that we have a strong position in the world, and that we would sacrifice everything if we were to give that up. And it
Hmm.
really, this election to me is about the survival of democracy, making sure that we have people that do not believe that they're above the law. You know, the Supreme Court said that the president is not bound, he's immune to somehow the Constitution says that the president is supposed to faithfully execute the law, but is not bound by it.
Mm.
And given the fact that the presidential powers have been unchained by that decision, we need somebody that is going to uh, stand by that because of their own conviction, to say, I'm not above the law. I'm not going to break the law. I believe in our institutions, and it's profoundly important to make sure that we
Mhm.
continue.
And to that point, Vice President Harris has made a conscious decision to make upholding the law her chosen career path. And that absolutely matters in times like this. Zeta, last word.
Absolutely. I think that it is really important that we all get out and vote, whether you vote early, vote by mail, vote in person. The margin in Pennsylvania is way too thin, and Erie is a county that's going to matter. We are going to determine who is next president of the United States. It's so important that you get involved with this election, not just with Kamala Harris's campaign, but every campaign down the ballot in Pennsylvania. Stop by the Erie Dems office, stop by the Harris campaign office, sign up to volunteer, to phone bank, to canvas, to help make sure we get these candidates in office. We're going to protect our freedoms, our civil liberties, and ensure that we can kind of make sure that our next generation is going to be protected as they come on through.
Excellent.
To
Thank you
your
so
point,
much.
we do have to make sure that the down ballot, it doesn't matter if we have the White House. We've already seen what the House does if we don't have the proper people in there.
Mhm.
Look at this last one. It's the do nothing House. Let's get some stuff done. Let's get the people in there that we need in there to do this stuff.
So, Zeta, Scott, Rock, and Selena, thank you all so much for coming on the show today and talking about your experience at the rally and your take on this upcoming election cycle. That's it for our show today. You can tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. Remember, the Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLN PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. If you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion for the show, you can call the Next hotline at 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Marcus Atkinson. Come and join us again so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.